Hello and welcome back to Town to the Tyre. Today I'm joined by a driver from my local area who I first saw on East Midlands Today, which is our local news show. And as soon as I saw her, I knew I had to invite her to the podcast. She's a Formula Woman ambassador, aiming to race in the Ginetta GT Academy next year, while balancing this with working as a karting mechanic and also studying a zoology degree at university. I hope you enjoy my chat with Alicia Barrett. Please do go and check out her socials and give her a follow after the podcast. I hope you enjoy the episode. So I know we've just been chatting about the fact that we're both actually from Nottingham. So I've got to start with a question about Nottinghamshire and kind of the motorsport climate here. How did you kind of get involved in motorsport from Nottinghamshire? Are there any kind of local tracks that kind of opened your eyes to it and any influence that the kind of area has had on your career?
Yeah, so originally I'm actually from North Lincolnshire, but the track I started at is actually only half an hour away from where I live now. So it's actually in the Nottinghamshire area. So I started my karting career at a track called PF International, which is obviously quite a popular karting track and it's used for the European series and things like that. So when I was 8, I got taken to that local kart track by my parents, and they used to have a scheme called Race for Buttons. So you could literally go borrow their kit and equipment, but it wasn't corporate carts, it was proper go-karts. So I think at the time it was the cadets that they ran there. So it just gave you an opportunity to try it and see if you liked it. And clearly I did after my first session. So I used to go every other week on a Monday evening after school. We used to travel from North Lincolnshire over to Nottinghamshire to actually go to that track. So it's great now that it's local because they do a lot of work there.
That's really cool. Were your parents involved in motorsport at all? What kind of made them take you along to that?
So they'd never come from a motorsport family. They've never really done anything themselves. They both thought were always really interested in like fast cars. My dad liked to buy different types of cars, and I always was interested in that when I was younger too, naturally because of that. But from a racing perspective, none of my family had done that. I was kind of the first one to do it. I think one of my dad's friends were taking his son along to it, and he kind of said, "Oh, you should come along as well." I do have a little brother, but he would have been too young for it at the time. So I got taken instead, which I'm quite grateful for.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I speak to drivers, often some of their like standout memories racing have come from karting. Do you have any kind of looking back at your karting experience? Do you have any kind of races or moments or results or anything at all that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think there's a few that like pop up to my head when I think about it. Probably the first one that comes to mind is my first win in like a major championship. So I used to race in both the British Kart Championship in the UK and Little Green Man in the UK as well. And I won my first race at PF at my home track in that championship in the junior X30 class. So that was a big standout moment for me because all my family were there as well. I had two of my best friends there too. And I think my teacher from school came down to watch. So it was kind of, yeah, funny that I ended up winning that race because I had quite a few people there watching. And that was quite a standout moment for me because I proved to myself that I could do it. And I did it at my home track as well. So it was quite special. And then I also did all the European series, and I did my first ever all-female karting race in 2019 out in France. I was the only English competitor. All the rest were from like France, Spain, Russia, from different parts of the world. We'd never been to the track before. My team manager came, and then just my parents, and kind of had to figure it out. And I ended up winning the female European title there. So that was quite a standout moment also because we kind of just went along, not really knowing what to expect. And I was really proud that I was the first woman to win that championship because that was the first time they'd ran that race, and also proud that I was the only British person on the grid as well. So that was really cool, and the only time that I'd actually raced against a full grid of women in from started in 2011. 2019 was the first time I'd actually done that. So it was a really tough and competitive grid, and it was really nice to see. So that's also probably one of my favorite standout races.
I feel like something that I noticed, especially, I don't know if you've seen the F1 Academy documentary on Netflix, the recent one that just came out. A lot of episodes really delved into the dynamic of drivers having their parents there or it being their home race. And I feel like that's something that
hasn't really been spoken about. It's been, I feel like in F1, everyone says, oh, it's your home race, whatever. But in the kind of younger series, the like, the feeder categories, I feel like it's not spoken about too much, like the pressure that comes with it being your home race and having support there, having your family, having your friends, versus it just being, a more regular race weekend, I guess. Do you find having your parents supporting you and being there at your races, or having friends and family, wider family, as you said there, kind of, do you think that helps with your performance?
I think so. I mean, a lot of the time, I think when you kart quite regularly, it was either like one of my parents with me. So obviously it wasn't really normal to have a lot of family or friends there supporting. Sometimes like my friends from school would come along, like if they could. But usually it was either just me and my dad or me and my mum at the races. So I don't know if it's pure coincidence that I ended up winning that first race when they were all there. But I think, maybe that is something that helps, because I think having that support there, it just gets you in the right mind frame. And what's difficult about PF is that a lot of people are good at PF because it is such a popular track and a track that people tend to go to all the time. It makes it super competitive. So I think you feel the pressure a little bit because it's like, yeah, it's my home track, but also a lot of other people come here a lot. So it's not like, I don't know, if you go to Scotland and the Scottish people who might have been to Larkhall a lot, or the British people only go there to test probably maybe once or twice before the race, whereas PF people go pretty much every month if they can in between all the different series. So yeah, I think it's really nice. And I think obviously I'm sure that support helped subconsciously. I don't think you think about it at the time, but yeah, I think it just made that moment a bit more special. And maybe that support does make a difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to ask because I feel like you juggle so many things alongside your racing career. Obviously, your university degree. I know you do some work as a mechanic as well. Firstly, how do you balance it all? And secondly, how do you feel like especially with the work as a mechanic that you do, how do you feel like that actually feeds into and benefits your racing?
Yeah, so juggling it all is definitely difficult. I'm not gonna lie. I think especially with this last year of uni, I mean, I've graduated now. I get my results on Thursday, so very, very close to all finishing. But this year has been particularly difficult balancing it in both the degree and also working as a mechanic, because obviously the driver that I mechanic for, I'm full time with him, so he does the European series as well as the British series. So I think the 2 months that I had most of my assignments in, I spent 3 weeks in Italy mechanicking out there, and then we were in Spain for 2 weeks. I'm literally flying to Germany on Friday for 10 days to go do the next European round out there. So it's pretty busy. I think, not gonna lie, racing myself and being at school kind of prepped me for this, because I literally used to I had Monday to Saturday school. A lot of the time I would miss Friday, Saturday to go and race. And before you know it, you'd be traveling back late on a Sunday night, usually early hours of Monday morning, and be back to school again. And I remember then having to juggle homework and exams. And when I did my A levels, I mechanicked as well. So I think that all kind of prepped me into good time management as best as I can. Sometimes this year has been definitely overwhelming, and at some points I thought it was going to catch up on me, but I've got through it. I've somehow managed it. And now that I don't have my uni, I'm kind of wondering what to do with my time in the week. So yeah, it's been tough, but it's been worth it. And I feel like when you put your mind to it and you really want something, you make it happen, you make the time. And any little bit of time I had in the day, I tried to make sure I was managing it in the correct way. So I'm just grateful now that all of that is kind of paid off. And you touched on, how does the mechanicking feed into racing? I think it's really important to understand the workings of the car when you're racing, just generally. And karting's a great way to do that. So I always say now, I think if I hop back into a go-kart, I'd just have a totally different understanding, because from changing the setup, from my driver's feedback, it helps me pass on into my racing, whether it be in cars, it's all still the same principle. And if you think of factory drivers, for example, that get chosen to race for a certain team, the main reason they pick those drivers is to develop a car. And you can't develop a car without understanding the workings of it and giving feedback. So I think it's really, really helped just overall given me an understanding of if I come in and I don't know the car's understeering, what's the sort of things that I can change to help that or suggest to the team. So I definitely think overall it's kind of just been an added skill set that's helped overall.
Yeah, I bet as you said, now you finished university, you're almost like this is probably, I guess, maybe the most free time you've had ever.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah,
feels
ever.
like.
Literally. I don't think I've ever had this much free time on my hands, but I'm trying my best to fill it. I feel like when you're used to being busy, you kind of like it that way. So I'm sure it'll be more busy in the upcoming months. But yeah, I'm trying to enjoy a bit of free time at the moment.
That makes sense. I feel like when you're obviously a teenager and balancing, as you said, school, education, A levels, and then also your racing career, that these teenagers, like, I don't think sometimes people don't realize that, like, there are drivers doing like F4 level series, for example, or things like that that are like 15, 16, like they're, still so young. Do you feel like the fact that you were racing kind of when you were going through that kind of phase of your life, do you think that made you mature quickly in terms of learning those like skills like time management, organization, things like that?
Absolutely. I think now, like where I am in my career and where I'm heading now with my career would have never have happened if I didn't have that mindset, because it does set you up in the right way. Because I quickly had to learn that, you've got to, if you go away and do something that you love, like racing, I can't let anything else fall behind. So my motivation for doing well in school was always I get to go racing at the weekend. And if my grades drop, then I can't go and do that. So that kind of set me up in that way. But I always am grateful now because I just think I wouldn't be the person I am and the way that I am without that. Because when you're having to juggle so many things, you've definitely got to kind of have everything in place. And like you said, I don't think a lot of people realize that when they see the average driver. The problem is racing in itself, and in my instance, finding sponsorship for racing is a full-time job in itself, really. So then trying to slot everything in around that is really difficult. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of respect goes out to the drivers, especially the drivers that do, your single seaters and your European races where you're literally traveling all the time. There's a lot more effort, I think, that goes into it than all the on-track stuff.
Mm. Touching on the financial side, I know it's something that you've been quite open about, and also just I think in the motorsport world in general, everyone's being a lot more open about it now than maybe they were in the past. Um, what's your kind of experience navigating that? As you said, coming from a background as well where no one in your family had kind of raced before, it is even, at karting level, it's an incredibly expensive sport. And I feel like, as you said, you've kind of got to be very much like a business person as well as a racing driver. I know Bianca Bustamante on the documentary I mentioned, like the amount of kind of influencer work, as they kind of described it on there, that she has to do, and that's all to fund her career. I know there's a course at Loughborough College nearby to where we are, where they really teach the kind of business side of motorsport. What's your kind of experience on that side of the motorsport world, I guess?
Yeah, I think obviously I was fortunate enough that my parents were able to fund my karting journey. And then unfortunately my parents split in 2020. So that obviously changed circumstances. So I stopped racing quite abruptly, like I wasn't expecting it. And like you said, because my parents didn't come from a racing background, when I look back at my journey now, I think I definitely would have done things a little bit differently and maybe not stayed in karting for as long. And for instance, I didn't know about like the Ginetta Junior Scholarship and all these different scholarships to go into cars because we just weren't exposed to it and just didn't know. All we knew was karting. I think even when I was karting when I was young, I didn't even know about F1 really. Like I didn't really follow it. So I think we kind of learned as we went along. So then when I did stop, I literally hadn't raced from the end of 2020 till October last year was my first race in cars, and I'd had a 4-year break in between from doing any sort of racing. And obviously in that time got my license to step up to cars and did a lot of coaching in cars, worked with a lot of female organizations to help women get into the sport. But alongside that, obviously, yeah, like you said, the business side, you are basically it is your own business, racing. It really is, because you're not only the driver, you then have to think about, okay, well, how do I get sponsors? If I get sponsors, how do I keep the sponsors? How do I make the sponsors happy? The way that my circumstances changed recently is just after December, I got reached out to by a promoter. So he's local to where I am, and he typically does like boxing promotion and has dabbled a bit in football. And he basically said, like, I want to help you find the money to go racing. So was different to him to like a typical management company. I guess with a management company, you have to pay a fee each month, and you still have to have money there initially to even be able to have that sort of service. Whether is he doesn't do any of that, so he literally just goes and finds me the money, and then he takes a fee at the end. Which, you know what, if he goes and finds me the money, then he can take what he wants. So he's been working really, really hard, and he found the money for me to go and race earlier on this year in the 2 radical races that I did. Which honestly, if you'd have told me like last year that I'd been back out racing in that, I would have laughed, because you do get to a point where it seems impossible to get back into it again. But he's been absolutely amazing, and I've been flat out the last few months doing networking opportunities. I was at Ginetta on Wednesday filming to put a sponsorship video together, because my hopes are that I'm going to find the money to go do Ginetta GT Academy next year. So that's not really been announced or anything yet, but that's currently what I'm kind of in the pipeline of trying to make happen. And my promoter's working really, really hard. But the difference between me and a lot of other people is I need to find the budget from zero, rather than I don't even have a starting point. So it's going to be a tough job, but my promoter is going to definitely give it his best shot. So I think if he can do that, it would be quite a breakthrough, because I don't know many people that have done that in motorsport who have been able to find at this sort of level that amount of money to go racing. So we'll see if it happens. Then, you know, it shows that it is possible, but a lot of hard work has definitely gone in behind the scenes for that. And I'm grateful I've had his knowledge and skill set to be able to help me do that.
And that's amazing. And as you said, like that's such a great championship. So to be able to get the budget to do that from scratch is, as you said, not something that many drivers have done, as far as I've heard, especially.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Touching on the radical races that you mentioned, what do you think has been kind of the most exciting, or I guess as well challenging part of stepping up to those cars this year?
I think the challenging bit that first pops to my head was actually the physical side of things, which I also don't think is touched upon a lot. So I was obviously very physically fit when I was karting, but having had such long of a break, I mean, I do my PT sessions every week, but you can't be racing fit unless you're out in a car doing it. And the radicals themselves, I hopped straight into an SR3, which is obviously the more powerful car. So it was definitely a big jump up, having literally the last thing I sat in was a go-kart. So it was quite a big jump up from me, but it was exciting. The first race I did in October in Donington was absolutely surreal, because I only found out that week I was actually going to get to race in it. And in the wet race, I drove from P13 up to P4 in class. So that was great. Because it was wet, the physical side didn't really come into it, because it's just less physical when it's wet. And I kind of felt like I was driving a big go-kart round. So that was really good. But when I went to Brands Hatch earlier on this year in the heat, I really, really struggled. I'm not going to lie. After 3 laps, my neck was actually absolutely fine. But my arms, especially, and my shoulders, I was just getting to the point in the race where I couldn't really turn the wheel anymore. So, I mean, all the boys there as well were tired, but I was a lot, worse, which is kind of frustrating, because I found a lot of pace and I wasn't actually that far off, but I couldn't push past a certain lap time purely because of strength. I just physically couldn't do it. And if I could do the lap time, it might be for 1 or 2 laps, but after that, it was really hard to maintain. So I found that very challenging, because it's not something you can change overnight either. It's not like they're saying go brake later into a corner. It's quite literally, you need to go and get stronger. So that was hard for me to face mentally. But on the positive side of things, I learned so much about car control, how the car feels, just the way that the whole structure is in cars as well, because it's quite different to a karting structure. Obviously, karting is like qualify. I mean, the British Championship, when you do double headers, is literally qualifying 3 heats and a final all in one day, and you do it again the next day. Whereas in cars, it's quite spread out, and there's a lot of red flags, which I've noticed as well, because karts, they don't really red flag unless there's a serious incident, whereas in cars happens quite a lot. So just all these little things, I guess, has been really cool for me to learn and take on board, and hopefully pass on into if I do the championship next year.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine when you're, you know, driving, well, firstly, it was a new car for you, but also your first experience as well. Um, especially after so much time away, I imagine there's so much to learn. How did you, as well, especially, you can't just like take that car out and test it as much as you want. Like there are limitations. So how did you kind of find, was there anything like away from the track where you weren't able to just go and drive it around Donington or Brands Hatch as much as you wanted? Is there anything off track that you feel helped you prepare?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, like I mentioned, I do my PT sessions. So especially after that first race in October, there was certain bits that I knew I could work on better in the gym, like work more on my shoulders and my arms. And also my partner has a sim and he sim coaches. So I had my own personal coach, which was handy. So when I did find out about the Donington race that week, I went over to his house and we did a lot of laps on there. So even just being able to turn up to the track and feel comfortable that I know which way around, and it sounds silly, but know which way round it's going, the characteristics of the track. I at least have a rough braking reference. I at least have a rough understanding of what I need to do to get around the track. So that helped massively. I think if I'd have, because obviously I'd literally never driven any cars or anything before I did that Radical race. I'd done one test day in it, which was the week before when I found out. So I knew that I had to do whatever I could kind of to learn as quick as possible. So I think if I'd have turned up having not done the sim work, it would have took me a lot longer to adapt. So I think that was a very key part for me of being able to turn up and just feel a little bit more comfortable. And rather than thinking about the track, I was able to think a little bit more about the car.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know last year as well, you did a qualifying event for the Formula Women Nations Cup where you qualified fifth out of 40 drivers, I believe it was. How did that come about? And how did you end up being the driver who got to, you know, represent England and the UK and that?
So I've had quite a long journey with Formula Woman. So when I initially stopped in 2020, there was an expression of interest out. So a little bit of background on it. Formula Woman initially ran in 2004 and they did a massive competition then with the Mazdas. And then obviously, I guess it was a little bit too early for women in motorsport. It never really took off. So then they decided to relaunch it again after putting out this expression of interest. I remember my boyfriend actually found it on Facebook and sent it to me, and I thought it was a scam because it was like £99 to enter for the competition. I was like, there's no way there's any motorsport out there that's this cheap. So I kind of just took a punt with it, really. I was doing my A levels at the time and mechanicking also, and I was like, there's only one chance at doing something like this, so let's just do it. When I first did it, obviously it was COVID as well, so I was 17, but I hadn't done my driver's test yet because it was so backed up. And the two entry requirements were being a female and having a driver's license. So I remember messaging them and I was like, look, I don't have my driver's license yet, but before the first competition, I will have it. My test is that week. So if I pass, I should be all right.
Yeah.
And literally the first round was first competition bit was at Anglesey. I literally had my driving test 2 days before. Thank goodness I passed. So I was able to go to the competition, and I didn't even have a car. So my mum drove me all the way up to Anglesey and I just had to go at it. And I remember being gutted because there was like certain sections. So to do media test, filming, fitness, actually on track around the Anglesey. And then there was meant to be karting as well. And when we turned up, they were like, oh, unfortunately, we can't do the karting because of insurance problems. And I was thinking, that's the one bit that I was feeling okay about. So I kind of got chucked in the deep end. The car bit was my first round up, so obviously it rotated round. So I did that bit, got that bit out of the way, did everything else. Found out that I got through to the next round. The next round was hosted at PF, so obviously felt a lot more comfortable there. But to cut a long story short, I ended up making it through to the final 10, sorry, that went out to Sweden. and I narrowly missed out. So 6 girls went through, and I remember them saying they had concerns about me going through because I was doing my A levels, and I was also off to South Africa a month volunteering, like when the championship started. So the prize was meant to be a fully funded seat in the GT Cup in a McLaren GT4. So I was told that I'd be a reserve driver instead. So that's kind of how I got involved in Formula Woman. And from there, I ended up working for the company, did a lot of coaching, ran my own karting business to get women into motorsport. So I worked quite a lot with them, really, and with the female motorsport community. And then when they finally announced that they were doing Nations Cup, all the Formula Woman ambassadors automatically had a place to be able to go and represent their country. So I got to represent England. Obviously, at this point, it's quite funny because all the girls I'd coached had done more racing and seat time than I had, and I was then racing against them. So it was actually a pretty surreal experience. And I didn't obviously get any chance to train on track other than that race that I did at Donington in October in the pouring rain. And then I rocked up to Dubai in December and it was 30 plus heat. So I had to learn a lot again in a short amount of time. So to be honest, I was so happy to end up with 5th because I was proud of myself and the fact that I just went out there and gave it a shot. And it was a really cool experience. So yeah, it was another tick off the books that I got to race a Radical in Dubai.
Absolutely. I mean, as you said, you can't really, as someone who goes to Donington often, you can't really get much more different than a rainy Donington
Yeah,
and
exactly. It was
Dubai.
big difference when I turned up to Dubai and it was sandy and dusty and very hot. So yeah, at least the good thing was at least I understood the car. So I could at least take that on board. But yeah, it was such a cool experience.
You mentioned that the prize was going to be the McLaren drive in the GT Cup. And more recently, you have been involved with McLaren, if I'm right, as last year you were selected as part of the 60 Scholars Programme. What, for anyone who's not familiar with the programme, what does that sort of involve and what benefits do you get from being selected as part of that?
Yeah, so the entry requirements for that were you had to be studying a STEM degree at university, either in your second year or your last year, or you had to have recently graduated. And you also had to have interest in motorsport. And I just kind of applied from there because I study zoo biology at uni. So even though it wasn't motorsport specific, it's still a STEM degree. And obviously, with my other bits of experience in motorsport, I thought I'm just going to apply and see. I honestly didn't really think I'd get on just because of the type of subject that I study. And I was absolutely thrilled when I got on board, and the program was absolutely amazing because ultimately it's helped me decide what I want to go on to next. So it was a 6-week program overall. So 60 women were selected. There was a range of us. So some girls did astrophysics, like this. Some were like motorsport engineering. Some were marketing. Some were sustainability. Some were computer science. So there was a range of us of STEM degrees and subjects that were involved. And we got to visit the main McLaren Centre. So that was really cool. And when we were there, we had talks from different people in the industry and we got to do a bunch of different workshops and just get to actually speak to the people who are working in those types of jobs and ask a bunch of questions. And it was really insightful overall. And we worked quite closely with their partners, Google, Udemy, Cisco. So that was also really nice because it opened up the doors into that sort of industry as well. And then in between the first visit there and the last visit there, we had a bunch of online workshops. And the aim of those workshops were to each to develop a different skill set. So we did a lot about leadership, a lot about sustainability, a lot about like how to be adaptable and resilient and different things like that. And also just a little bit more specific motorsport related skills as well. And then the final visit was really cool because we had a talk from Zach Brown, Bianca spoke as well. And we actually ended in a karting race at the local team sport. So that was really cool because I got to go and win that, and that was quite fun. But what I noticed was I was actually the only person there who raced. Everyone else just studied it. But I was actually the only person there who had experience in racing. So that was actually quite interesting to see that, because I think sometimes a lot of people think you're either a racing driver or you're not, then don't necessarily get
Mm.
involved. But I think more and more now we're starting to see people studying the subject and being interested in other parts of the sport rather than just driving as well. I think Bianca spoke a little bit about that as well, because I know she did a university degree alongside racing. So yeah, it was a really, really cool scholarship. I'm so thankful that I was able to be selected for it. And ultimately now that's helped me decide what I want to do with my next steps. So yeah, it was really cool.
That is really cool. Speaking of next steps, I know we've spoken about Ginetta GT Academy. I've seen you say as well that F1 Academy could be part of your medium-term vision for your career. Generally, I guess you've kind of got it in place what you want to do with your next year, but just looking more generally to kind of the future, what series in particular really excite you? Any particular cars you'd love to drive? Any particular series you'd love to be involved in the future?
I think it might be, I think a lot of people do say this now, but I think GT are really starting to pave the way for women in motorsport. And I've kind of, other than F1 Academy, I think for me, F1 Academy would be a stepping stone onto someone else, not something else, not necessarily focusing on the single seater route. So for me, like my ultimate goal would be to do something like the Le Mans 24-hour. I love Iron Dames and the concept and everything that they do with that. And they're obviously very successful with it. But to be honest, I'd be happy to race for any sort of team in the GT series. I've always loved Porsche as a manufacturer. So that would be really cool for me to be able to say I've driven something like that. So that's kind of like what's on my radar. But ultimately, I just want to be out racing, doing something. But as like if I could do something, that would be like my end term goal, to be able to go and compete in a endurance GT series in something like that. But I do think now, you see more and more women getting involved in that space, and I think they're trying to make it more and more accessible. So that's really, really nice to see, and I think it will only get better from where it is now.
The amount of people who I ask like a similar question to that, even drivers who I've interviewed who are on this kind of single seater ladder, everyone says Le Mans, no matter what they're driving currently, whether they've ever driven a GT car or not. It's Le Mans seems to be
Oh,
the common answer for that. And I mean, I don't blame any driver for saying that. I mean, I've not fully caught up as we're chatting. The 2025 race literally just happened, but not I know the results. I've not fully gone back and watched it all yet, but I mean, there's nothing quite like it, is there?
no, I think it's one of those races where like you'll obviously like ex-F1 drivers go and do it. I think there was quite a few this year actually that participated in it. I think it's just one of them races that everyone wants to be able to say that they've made it to. And it's just such like an iconic track really, and such a cool race. And for me, because I've raced in Le Mans like on the kart track, and I would really love to do the car track as well. I just think that would be a really cool thing to be able to say at the end of your career. But yeah, I think there's a reason why it's on like the top of everyone's lists. And who knows? I'll see where the journey takes me, but it would be really cool to be able to say that I've driven around that track.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today on the podcast. Before we go, do you want to just plug your socials where people can find you and keep up with your racing journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's Alicia Barrett Racing on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Keep an eye out soon, because obviously I'm gonna hopefully be releasing the plans for next year. I've got a test day coming up in the Ginetta soon as well, so hopefully I can post a lot of content about that too.
Brilliant. They'll all be down in the description as well. Please do go check out Alicia's socials and keep up to date with what she's up to. Thanks so much for joining the podcast today. And yeah, hope to see you racing at Donington sometime soon.
Thank you. It'd be great, and thank you for the interview.